The ceasefire in Gaza has been breached by Hamas. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu convened a security assessment with IDF top officials to examine response measures for the violation of the ceasefire in the southern strip. The IDF issued a statement saying that terrorists fired an anti-tank missile and gunfire toward IDF troops operating to dismantle terrorist infrastructure in the Rafah area. The IDF was operating in accordance with the ceasefire agreement. In response, the Air Force launched strikes in the Rafah area to eliminate the threat and dismantle tunnel shafts and military structures used for terrorist activity. Just a few days ago, Hamas terrorists emerged from a terror tunnel and opened fire on Israeli troops in 2 different incidents. The IDF said the terrorist actions constitute a blatant violation of the ceasefire agreement. And meanwhile, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu announced at the start of the government meeting today that he was submitting a proposal to give the war a new permanent official name, the War of Redemption. The Prime Minister said after 2 years of continuous fighting, Israel remembers how it started. He said, "We rose up from the terrible disaster of October 7th and added, quote, 'This is the war of redemption of our people as a direct continuation of the War of Independence.'" Meanwhile, overnight, 2 more hostages' bodies were returned to Israel, though Hamas did not say who they were. The Prime Minister's office and the IDF confirmed the identification of Ronen Engel and Suntaya Okarasa. There are still 16 slain hostages remaining in Gaza. On October 7, 2023, Engel was killed by Hamas in Nir Oz, while his wife Karina and their daughters Mika and Yuval were kidnapped. The following month, Karina, Mika, and Yuval were freed from Gaza as a part of a ceasefire deal. And it later emerged that Ronen had been slain in the kibbutz on October 7th and his remains taken captive. Okarasa, a 30-year-old Thai citizen, was also murdered on October 7, 2023, and his body was taken into Gaza from the orchards of kibbutz Be'eri. His death was pronounced on May 16, 2024. And earlier, Hamas returned a body that was later identified as 70-year-old Eliyahu Margalit from kibbutz Nir Oz. Margalit was murdered on October 7th and his body, too, kidnapped into Gaza. His daughter Nili was taken hostage and released in November of 2023. Over the weekend, there were funerals for the returned hostages. Hundreds gathered in Petah Tikva to bid farewell to slain hostage Inbar Haiman, who was 27 years old when she was abducted from the Nova Music Festival and murdered in Hamas captivity. And moving on, U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance and Middle East envoy Steve Witkoff are due to arrive in Israel tomorrow to advance the next phase of Donald Trump's 20-point Gaza peace plan. The visit comes amid Hamas delays in returning hostages' remains and denials that it plans to disarm as required. More from ILTV's Steve Leibovitz.
The visit of Vice President Vance and Middle East envoy Steve Witkoff will come as the process moves from immediate hostage recovery and ceasefire implementation toward long-term proposals for Gaza's security and governance. According to reports, this next phase will focus on establishing safe zones, demilitarizing the Strip, and developing transitional governance mechanisms, all key elements in the U.S.-brokered agreement. Israeli officials say they will press for total disarmament of Hamas, while the U.S. side plans to lead international force contributions and technical support to secure post-war Gaza. Ahead of the arrival of Vance and Witkoff, Hamas is saying it will not commit to full disarmament, but says it's open to a 3 to 5 year truce with Israel to rebuild Gaza. Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu said that the war in Gaza is not over until Hamas is fully disarmed and the Strip demilitarized. He reiterated that the current ceasefire agreement is only phase 1 and that phase 2 involves Hamas's complete disarmament and will determine when the conflict truly ends, hopefully in an easy way, but if not, in a hard way. Netanyahu also linked the reopening of the key Rafah crossing to Hamas's fulfillment of returning all hostages and their bodies, saying Israel will not move forward until the agreement terms are met. On the issue of the hostage remains, Israel has reportedly shared intelligence with the U.S. and other mediators on the locations of deceased hostage bodies in Gaza. Coordinates were given to Egypt, Qatar, and Turkey to press Hamas to complete the transfer, as required by the ceasefire deal. Israel says Hamas could hand over a double-digit number of bodies immediately, but is deliberately delaying. During the current ceasefire, humanitarian aid continues to enter Gaza through approved crossings under strict Israeli supervision. Trucks carrying food, medicine, and fuel are being inspected by Israeli security forces before entering to ensure supplies are not diverted to Hamas. Israel says the aid flow is part of the U.S. brokered agreement and is intended for civilians only, while warning that any violations of the deal by Hamas could halt deliveries. Meanwhile, the U.S. is working on the next phases of the Trump plan for Gaza. Azerbaijan has reportedly agreed to commit troops to an international stabilization force in Gaza. The force is part of the U.S. brokered post-war plan for Gaza, intended to support security, train Palestinian forces, and assist in demilitarizing the Strip.
And U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner revealed new details regarding the hostage for ceasefire negotiations in a joint interview with CBS's 60 Minutes. In an exclusive peek at the full interview, Witkoff revealed tension and disagreement between Israel and the U.S. following Israel's attempt to eliminate Hamas officials in Doha, Qatar with precision strikes. Witkoff even added that he and Kushner felt betrayed, as no one in the White House knew the strikes were coming.
We woke up the next morning to find out that there had been this attack. Wow. And of course, I was called by the president.
You had no idea, obviously.
None whatsoever. You know, I think both Jared and I felt, I just feel we felt a little bit betrayed.
Now, I had heard that the president, that he was furious.
I think he felt like the Israelis were getting a little bit out of control in what they were doing, and that it was time to be very strong and stop them from doing things that he felt were not in their long-term interests.
Witkoff added that striking the Qataris had impacted the negotiation process.
And by the way, Leslie, it had a metastasizing effect because the Qataris were critical to the negotiation, as were the Egyptians and the Turks. And we had lost the confidence of the Qataris. Right. And so Hamas went underground, and it was very, very difficult to get to them. And
they were your link to Hamas.
Absolutely.
You were dealing through the Qataris to make your proposals to Hamas.
And it became very, very evident as to how important and how critical that role was.
The full interview is set to air tonight, and Witkoff and Kushner are expected to reveal more behind-the-scenes information from the Gaza ceasefire deal negotiations. And U.S. President Donald Trump is threatening Hamas over the terrorist group's ongoing executions of civilians in Gaza. Trump also weighed in on potential normalization between Israel and Saudi Arabia, saying the Saudis are on board.
Relating to the ongoing executions in Gaza, Trump posted to his X account, quote, "If Hamas continues to kill people in Gaza, which was not the deal, we will have no choice but to go in and kill them." Local reports indicate that Hamas has killed between 40 and 50 suspected collaborators with Israel, rivals, or members of Palestinian Authority-linked groups. This since the start of the ceasefire less than 1 week ago. Executions have reportedly been targeting former Palestinian Authority security officers, clan leaders, and civilians accused of, quote, collaboration with Israel or opposing Hamas's rule. Incidents include public executions in Gaza City.
Well, I'm looking at what's happening, and that wasn't the deal that was made, and we'll see what happens. It's calmed down. It's a tough neighborhood. We know that. We have a commitment from them, and I assume they're going to honor that commitment. I hope they do. And
on the matter of the bodies of Israeli hostages to be returned to Israel, Trump said this.
They brought back bodies today, as you probably know. But they also said they're going to behave. We're going to find out if they behave. If they behave good, if they don't behave, we'll take care of it.
On the matter of normalization between Israel and Saudi Arabia, Trump claims Saudi officials told him, quote, as recently as yesterday, that they're willing to join the Abraham Accords. Speaking to Fox News, Trump said he expects more Arab and Muslim countries to follow now that the ceasefire has been reached in Gaza and the Iranian threat has been neutered.
I don't want to use the word immediate, but soon. The Abraham Accords are a miracle in a way. And the 4 countries that went in initially, including UAE, highly respected, big and highly respected, they stayed in, and they're doing incredibly well. I mean, they're basically trading with Israel and have access and everything else. I mean, it's good for everybody. I hope to see Saudi Arabia go in, and I hope to see others go in. I think when Saudi Arabia goes in, everybody goes in.
And joining us now with more on the latest developments in Gaza is Dr. Gerald Steinberg, head of NGO Monitor. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
So Israel is now walking a very fine line between issuing a harsh response to this breach by Hamas, but taking care not to bring the ceasefire to an abrupt end. So what can Israel do at this point? And does it have to receive approval from the United States to issue a response?
I'll start with the second question first. The answer is no. This was clearly a violation. The attack with an RPG against Israeli soldiers that were in the area of Gaza that is defined as still under Israeli control was a total violation, an absolute violation of the ceasefire agreement. Therefore, Israel had every right and obligation to respond because it needs to send a very strong message to everybody connected to Hamas and other fighters, other terrorists in Gaza. This is not going to be tolerated. That's what Israel has done with respect to Hezbollah since the ceasefire, which has been, I think, about a year. Israel continues to make sure that any violation by Hezbollah members is met with use of force. And that's what Israel demonstrated today. If there are more attacks, Israel will respond. If Israel sees that there are no more attacks, then the ceasefire will be preserved and will go forward.
Now, Vice President J.D. Vance is set to arrive in Israel to discuss the future of this ceasefire deal. What will be the aim of his visit? Because, you know, the U.S. wants to move forward, but Israel is still stuck in this first phase, essentially waiting for Hamas to release the remaining hostages and, of course, to begin to disarm.
Well, we've heard from President Trump a number of times that if Hamas does not disarm or agree to disarm and cooperate with the process, then it will be met with, I think they say they'll be held to pay. I think that was one of the phrases that he used. Of course, Israel's complete agreement. There's no distance, no daylight between President Trump and I think also the vice president and Israel. The vice president is not involved directly in policy making. So I think this is more of a symbolic visit. It's meant to maintain the momentum. Also coming, and this I think more important actually, is that Steve Witkoff is going to be with him, and I think also Jared Kushner, which are two of the people who were involved in putting together the details of what we call the Trump plan, and to make sure that this doesn't just fall through like so many other ceasefire and peace agreements have fallen through because of failure to completely implement them. This is the real challenge. The words are great on paper. Hamas will completely cease fire. Israel will continue to withdraw. There'll be other phases. There'll be humanitarian aid. But if there's not going to be a serious enforcement of that, then it's not going to happen. The United States has to lead that process, not necessarily with boots on the ground. There are a couple of hundred American troops now that landed, I think, before the weekend, on Friday, or perhaps Thursday, in Israel, that are going to be putting together this framework for phase 2 for disarming Hamas. Who's going to actually do it? We heard today the United Arab Emirates has pledged some troops. It has to be under American leadership if it's going to work, and that's, I think, the importance of this visit.
Now, U.S. President Trump has also implied or hinted that Saudi Arabia could be joining the Abraham Accords imminently, but we're still far from the real end to this war, just as we saw today. Do you see the Abraham Accords advancing so long as Hamas is not disarmed, so long that the hostages are still being held?
I think it's good to be optimistic. It's good to hear those kinds of statements from American leaders. They're also talking about other countries perhaps joining. It's going to be a process. And it's not just a matter of starting the disarmament of Hamas, but we have to see stability in the area. We have to see that it's not Hamas, as it now is constituted, is not going to be able to rebuild. The process of providing aid, billions of aid provided by the United Nations frameworks, by European governments, by NGOs, was visibly stolen. They knew what was going on. They knew exactly what was being done with the aid. They knew about all the tunnels that were underground. They didn't want to deal with it. That cannot be allowed to be repeated. So what's going to come in its place? That's what has to be developed. That's going to take a lot of very difficult work. The UN agencies, the thousands of people that are employed through that process, the connections with Hamas that they have, those are not going to be simply erased. In many ways, that's more difficult even, or as difficult as disarming Hamas. It has to go together, so they can't rearm. And I think those are all parts of the process. And for the Abraham Accords to be expanded, the countries have to be committed to that process of not allowing aid, UN agencies, other frameworks, NGOs like Doctors Without Borders, Médecins Sans Frontières, Norwegian Refugee Council, to have any role because they're too closely allied with Hamas.
Absolutely. So still a lot of work ahead. Dr. Gerald Steinberg, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
And before we continue with more updates, tonight, ILTV News and the Jewish Agency for Israel will mark 2 years since the October 7th massacre with the powerful 90-minute broadcast. This special event airing tonight at 9 p.m. Israel time, right after our daily news, will share survivor testimonies, stories of resilience, and the unity of Jewish communities worldwide. Join us as we honor the victims, support the families, and stand together for Israel's future. You can scan the QR code now to sign up and be part of this meaningful program, or simply tune in on ILTV's YouTube channel right after this news broadcast. And moving on, across Israel, scenes of hope and relief continue. After more than 2 years in captivity, several freed hostages have now been discharged from hospitals and reunited with their families. For more on these emotional homecomings and what comes next, we go to India Naftali in Tel Aviv. India, what's the latest?
That's right. We are witnessing incredible displays of celebration and relief as the freed living hostages return home after more than 2 years in Hamas captivity. Among them are Omri Miran, Matan Zangaker, and Matan Angrest, who were discharged from Tel Aviv's Ichilov Medical Center 4 days after their release. Their families are now taking their first steps to rebuild their lives. Crowds lined the streets as the 3 men arrived home, greeted by flags, cheers, and banners. Hospital officials say they're in stable condition, but face a long road to physical and emotional recovery. This is what former hostage Omri Miran had to say.
ועכשיו זה באמת הזמן לחזור לחיים, להמשיך בחיים ולחזור למשפחה.
In the central city of Kfar Saba, crowds gathered to celebrate the return of Eitan Horn. He was photographed with his brother Yair, who was also kidnapped but released during a ceasefire at the beginning of the war. Eitan told the crowd this.
אני בסדר גמור, בבטח תמיד האמנתי שאני אגיע הביתה, והרגע זה הגיע בזכות כל עם ישראל.
Neighbors described it as a very emotional day, saying they waited years to see this moment. Former hostage Nimrod Cohen also received the homecoming of a hero, although he said he was not expecting it. And finally, in another emotional reunion, former hostage Emily Damari, who was freed in January, met newly released twin brothers Gali and Ziv Berman at Sheba Medical Center. She was close friends with them before they were all kidnapped on October 7th. But as Israel celebrates their homecomings, officials stress that the return of the fallen hostages is no less important than the living. Some of the hostages' bodies have been returned to Israel, but many still remain in Gaza, which is in violation of the ceasefire terms. Back to you.
Thank you, India, for the report.
On October 7, I was here at the Nova Music Festival. I ran for my life. Hid for 7 hours. Terrorists shot me twice. Thankfully, I survived. I'm still dealing with trauma, and I'm not alone. 3 million Israelis are in trauma. They need mental health care or physical rehabilitation. Wounded soldiers, families, and scared children.
Since 1912, Hadassah has been a life-changing force in Israel. Today, Hadassah has 2 world-renowned hospitals, pioneers breakthrough medical research, cares for youth, and has built the much-needed and largest rehabilitation facility in Jerusalem.
Thank you to everyone at Hadassah Hospitals. You've been helping me and so many others. And a special thanks to one nurse, my mom. I love you.
And moving on, a Palestinian man who took part in the October 7th terror attack has been arrested in Louisiana. Prosecutors say that on October 7, 2023, 33-year-old Mahmoud Amin Yaqub al-Mutadi joined an armed cell and crossed into Israel to join the invasion at Hamas's direction, then lied on his U.S. visa application. Phone data show he entered Israel near Kfar Aza on the morning of October 7th. Investigators found messages and photos of him posing with weapons and wearing a National Resistance Brigade's headband, a group that participated in the massacre. In recorded calls, Mutadi discussed the attack in real time, saying Israelis were still drunk from the holiday and describing soldiers being kidnapped. He entered the United States in 2024, obtained an Oklahoma driver's license, and was working in a restaurant when the FBI arrested him this month. The case is based partly on intelligence provided by Israel. Now, Mutadi faces terror support and visa fraud charges in federal court. And in other news, today we have the privilege of hearing once again from Yael Eckstein, president of the International Fellowship of Christians and Jews. She shares with us a recap of fellowship news.
Shalom, my friends from here in Israel, and here are 2 fellowship projects that you should know about this week. Number 1, this week marked the 2-year anniversary since the October 7th attacks. And in Israel, we celebrated the Flags of Fellowship event, where we planted 1,200 Israeli flags outside one of the burned homes at Nir Oz, where 1 in 4 of the people who lived there were either killed or kidnapped. At this ceremony, we heard from the mother of one of the kidnapped, and we even heard from the mayor of the region. Each one of them said very similar things, that within the darkness, we are called to bring light. And that's exactly what our Flags of Fellowship event at the International Fellowship of Christians and Jews does. Number 2, in America, we also celebrated Flags of Fellowship as over 1,200 places of worship planted 1,200 flags on each location to remember the 1,200 lives that were lost on October 7th. There were over 1.4 million Israeli flags planted throughout the United States of America and Canada as Christians stood in solidarity with their Jewish brothers and sisters. They are not scared. They are proud to stand in solidarity, and they will not back down in the face of evil. Well, there you have it, friends. There are 2 fellowship projects that you now know about at the fellowship. Join me next week, same place, same time, for more updates on what's happening on the ground here in the Holy Land. Shalom.
And now let's take a look at the weather forecast. Clear skies are expected around most of the country tonight, with temperatures reaching lows of 19 degrees Celsius or 65 degrees Fahrenheit. Then tomorrow we'll see clear skies alongside steady temperatures with highs of 29 degrees Celsius or 85 degrees Fahrenheit. And that's a wrap for today's news. For the latest updates from Israel on all your devices, be sure to follow our ILTV channels and our new live channel. And you can also catch us on Screen IL with 24/7 live coverage. Stay informed with the latest news straight from the heart of Israel. I'm Ladar Gravelazi. Be well, and thank you so much for watching.